This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Welcome everyone to today's Economy, Culture and Skills Committee meeting, and thank you for joining us as we discuss the important topic of major sports events in London. In our meeting, we'll evaluate the economic impact of these events, explore the challenges they present and identify the roles of key stakeholders involved in hosting them. Ultimately, we'll assess whether these events bring a net benefit to London. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to address. I'd like to remind everyone, please, to switch off their electronic devices or switch them to silent mode. And I'd also ask that members and guests position their electronic devices away from their microphones, please. And if you need to adjust your microphone, remember to lift it from the base rather than from the microphone itself, which unfortunately breaks them. Members of the public are encouraged to follow us at London Assembly on X and to use the hashtag Assembly Economy for this meeting. Now, I have a few items of business to cover. Sorry, is the mic okay? It's sounding a bit weird to me. It did change. You can hear me really loudly now. Okay. So, can I now ask our committee officer, Sal Fazal, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Assembly members Bakari, OBE and Small Adverts have both sent their apologies for absence. Assembly member Cooper is here as a substitute for Assembly member Small Adverts. Thank you.
Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from committee members? No, thank you. Minutes. Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 15th January 2025 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings? Thank you. Now, moving on to today's main item of business, we will be discussing major sports events in London. Today's discussions will be divided into two panels, and I'd like to welcome our first panel, Nick Bittell, Chief Executive Officer of London Marathon Group, Mark Camley, Executive Director of Park and Venues London Legacy Development Corporation, Esther Britton MBE, Head of Events and External Affairs UK Sport, and Councillor Mohammed Butt, Leader of the Council London Borough of Brent, where of course Wembley is. So, thank you very much for joining us. The first question I will start off with, and it's a question to all of our panel members, and I would ask, if you, when you start answering, if you could literally just give us maybe 10 seconds about your organisation and effectively why we've invited you to come and speak here and be on our panel. And I would ask panel members, if you feel that your answer has already been given by a previous panel member, please just refer to that and don't feel that you need to reiterate everything so that we can move on. We've got a lot of questions. So my first question to all of you is, what is the value for London in hosting major sports events? And I will start with Councillor Mohammed Butt.
First of all, thank you for inviting us here today as well. I'm Councillor Mohammed Butt, Leader of Brent Council, and we do have Wembley Stadium and Wembley Arena in the borough, and I think they've played an important part of who we are as Brent Council, but also some of the benefits that the stadium brings in relation to some of the events that take place there as well, and being able to help us to take a look at how we can regenerate and grow Brent, and for the better, taking into account the benefits that should accrue to the residents and the businesses, and hopefully working with our partners on the borders as well, and making sure that everyone understands the impacts and the benefits that further accrue from further afield as well.
And what do you think is the value for London in hosting major sports events?
I think if you take a look at some of the events that have taken place at Wembley Stadium, I will talk about Wembley Stadium because that's the one that sort of relates to myself. I think having a stadium like that in the borough in London, right, I think sends a message about sort of inclusivity, right, about opportunity, about giving some ambition and hope to some of the residents who may want to participate in sporting activities. But now it's the activities that take place in Brent are more than just, say, football. We have American football, rugby, but we also now host music events as well, and the other things sort of that we've tried, sort of electric car racing, things like that as well, right? And I think having something that always has something different which reaches out to many different people rather than just a football crowd or a rugby crowd, right, is a positive thing, right? Because, like I said, it goes back to inclusivity, right, and opening things up, not just to people of Brentford or Wembley or just further afield, but the whole of London can benefit with people coming in and going into restaurants, clubs, and just general shopping as well. And hopefully, taking the opportunity to go into theatres in central London and further afield as well.
Thank you. Esther Britton, MBE.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Esther Britton. I'm the Head of Major Events and External Affairs at UK Sport. UK Sport's role in this area is we're an arm's length body of DCMS, and one of our key roles is to make sure that there is a long-term strategic pipeline of major international sporting events hosted across the UK. I think what we've seen in London is London play quite a key role in being a key part of the nation's major events hosting strategy. And the benefits I'd like to think that the City of London has had is both economic, in terms of the economic returns that Mohammed has talked to, but it's also the showcasing of the city to a global audience. Some of the very biggest major sporting events have been hosted in this city, and that therefore sees the City of London beamed around the world. But equally, I think we've seen major sporting events here provide a societal impact through the provision of volunteering opportunities, of staff opportunities, of employment opportunities, and also a facilities benefit. We're quite lucky, I think, in this city that we've seen the development of facilities that are then open to the general public. To now, you can still swim in former Olympic venues. You can attend events at various different places. So for me, I think we see an economic, a societal and a sporting benefit through the hosting of events in the City of London.
Thank you. And Esther, would you mind just bringing the microphone just a little bit closer to you as well, please? Thank you very much. Mark Camley.
Thank you. Mark Camley. I'm the Executive Director of Park Operations and Venues at the London Legacy Development Corporation. So I look after the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park and the venues that LLDC is responsible for there. And building on the answers which were previously given, the Olympics and the Paralympics in 2012 have provided a great opportunity for investment in East London and the regeneration of the area as a whole. There are stats which shows that since then, if you look at Major League Baseball, which comes along to the London Stadium, brings an economic value for what the one weekend that's there each summer of £56 million. The World Athletics Championships, which were there in 2017, £100 million of economic value. But actually, I think the real value is in some of the social value and other indicators, including the fact that 1 million people swim in the former Olympic pool every year, everyone from school children getting the first swimming lessons, and it's where my kids learned to swim, through to elite athletes with the UK dive team based there. And if you look at the Copper Box Arena, 11,000 people there over the weekend watching England being successful in the netball. And that story applies, and we won, yeah. And that story applies actually to the former Olympic venues. But you could go on and talk about the jobs and the skills that have resulted in that, and even go on to the housing, schools, universities. But even where we are got spaces to use, where we've used interim facilities like the ABBA Arena in East London, generating £1 billion of economic value since it opened, there is advantages in the city if it plans and thinks about its regeneration and what it wants to achieve of holding these major events, but actually recognising that the Games is only the start of it.
Thank you very much. Nick Patel.
Thank you. I'm Nick Patel. I'm the Chief Executive of London Marathon Group. I should add I'm also an occasional lawyer, and my clients include UEFA and the Wimbledon Championships. And in the past I've acted for things like Rugby World Cup and Ryder Cup, so fair spread of major events. I won't repeat on things that have been said, but London Marathon is a slightly unusual organisation because we are a registered charity, and all the profits that we make get ploughed back into providing opportunities to people to become active. So far we've given away over £110 million to projects largely in London, but some national, including we were the sole funder of the community track at LLDC. When we were formed, one of the aims of setting up the London Marathon was to show that Britain, when it comes to put on events, Britain does it best. And there's a degree of soft power that comes from staging major events. There was a conference a couple of years ago about soft power in Great Britain, and sport featured very, very highly in that index as to what people think about Britain. You're seen in 200 countries around the world, tens of millions of people seeing your event and seeing London and Britain at its best. Our direct economic impact we've spoken about when we last did a study in 2022, it was £167 million from staging the London Marathon. That's made up of things like 188,000 room nights just from that weekend. But one of the other differences for us is our stated aim is to get people active, and we've done that. We've inspired activity by putting on our events. We have for a number of years, although it's on hold at the moment, staged Ride London for the Mayor of London, and the research on that showed that 30,000 people a year took up cycling because of that event. So that direct line from holding major events to inspiring activity. So behaviour change is a really important part of why I think major events can help London and the wider economy.
Thank you very much, all of you. The next question is from Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to the panel. I think how I'll do this is that we've such a great panel. I'll direct my first question to Councillor Butt, and if anybody wanted to chime in, rather than asking you all the same questions, that might be a neater way to do this. But given that you have both Wembley Stadium and Wembley Arena, of which I've enjoyed on several occasions, could you just give a kind of a local view on the impact of the local economy and what sorts of businesses benefit most from major sports event taking place there?
Thank you for that. Both venues are slightly different. The arena has a capacity of about 20,000, obviously, and the stadium has a capacity of up to 93,000. And depending on the type of event, right, it does bring in a different crowd. Obviously, if you take, for example, during the summer, we just had all the music venues, music events that took place. What you find is that when people come in for some of those type of events, they spend a much longer time, right, and they take avail of the opportunities and the offerings that are there in the LDO, the Box Park, and also further afield, right? Because people don't just come to, say, Wembley Park Station. They come in through various different routes and accesses. And when people come through, say, Stonebridge Park Station, they're able to walk along the Harrow Road and take a look at some of the local offerings as well. And then if they go into the High Road into Wembley, they do make, they help to animate the space as well. Obviously, it's not just about sort of the opportunities that are available there. The stadium also has opportunities for offerings there as well, and it does bring in a lot of opportunities around employment, the supply chain as well, further afield. The hospitality industry really benefits from the opportunities that are there. I know loads of residents who actually do stewarding or the hospitality. One of my local residents actually works for the stadium as well and helps to create sort of more opportunities for other residents and businesses and community organisations to get involved as well. So the impact, I would say, is a truly positive impact, and it opens up sort of more conversations about how we continue to improve that offer going forward as well.
Just want to come in on that. Yeah, Mark?
Perhaps if I could just, based on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Parks experience, say a little bit about that. Specifically, things like hotels. So there's now 10-fold increase in hotels around Stratford than there was in 2012. Food and beverage outlets, whether they're on the park or elsewhere locally, definitely benefit. Retail, if you're familiar with Stratford, you'll realise we've got one of the biggest retail malls in Europe with Westfield there, and transport, because actually particularly for non-regular events, and by that I mean things like concerts or MLB, then actually you're getting quite a lot of international visitors coming to those, and so there's inbound transport, outbound, and then transport around the system more generally.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it was just to Nick and Esther on the international tourism part. Is there anything more you'd like to add to that?
I think, look, a city like London has a lot of tourist impact throughout the year. I think a role that major events can play is to showcase and show the city to people all around the world. Lots of events and lots of rights holders will tell you that their events have been seen by millions of people. Even if you just keep it at the millions level, that is sufficient. They don't always tell the truth. Just to keep it at that, it shows the opportunity, though, that televised major sporting events provide you to showcase the city that you have and the best that you have. One of the things I think that is really important for any city, whether London or any other, is that it looks at what its assets are and makes strategic choices, therefore, about what events it wants to host to do what. So for certain cities, there can be certain times in the year where international tourism numbers are lower, and therefore it's a good opportunity to bring event in to fill bed nights, as Nick said. Equally, there are other choices that you may choose not to host as many of those high-profile events, because actually smaller events can do different things and engage more with the local communities at different times of the year. So I think there is always a choice for a city about what events it wants to host and how it wants to target its support to bring things into the city. But for a city like London, the international tourism element is really important.
Yeah. And Nick?
I'll just add two things if I can. One is that our record in hosting major events has managed to position Britain in a place of expertise in a number of different fields, whether it's presentations or TV or any other skills that get to make up a major event. And we have been very good at exporting those skills to other major events around the world as a result, leading into massive inbound economic benefit to this country. The other one I would just add from London Marathon's point of view, because it is very unusual and different from others, is that our participants raise money for charity. And last year, our runners between them raised £73 million for British charities, which was a world record. So slightly different.
Different, but also important. I'll hand back to the chair, because I know the Assembly members have other questions.
Yeah, well, so it's £73 million. That's amazing. It's something we should be singing from the rooftops. Thank you. Assembly Member Garrett, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, so I mean, we've heard obviously the success of these huge, particularly the sort of international scale sporting events. I don't know if I need to declare an interest. I was an unsuccessful applicant for next year's London Marathon. Sorry, I won't hold you personally responsible. But I suppose, you know, thinking of ourselves as a public authority, most of the work to put those events on obviously comes from the event organisers, whether it's cricket, football, running, athletics, any other sport. So I'm trying to think from the GLA's point of view, what are the things that the GLA, including, I suppose, London and Partners and other sort of related bodies do that really actually help to make those events happen or not happen, or what could they be doing to make more of them happen? Because I suppose I'm just conscious of the fact when we read our briefing, it's full of lots of amazing events that happened, and of course, like all amazing things, everybody wants to pretend that, you know, they were the sole instigator of it. But I'm just conscious of the fact that event promoters probably think that they had quite a big hand in it as well. Nick, you.
Thank you. London is a complicated city to put on major events in. As I say, I act for UEFA, and during the European Championships in 2021, I was helping them in 9 different countries to put on that event. One of the difficulties in London is it spreads over so many jurisdictions. You know, even just something like the London Marathon, we have 6 local authorities, 3 police forces, 7 landowning authorities, and it goes on and on and on. And what London, at its best, could do is be a single point of contact. But it's not in a position to do that at the moment. You have to go and work it out with all of the separate local authorities. And with the best will in the world, they will have different policies, different people. It becomes very complex. London has the power of convening. And we have people, and I can see James Fitzgerald in the room, and you know, he and others within the GLA do that very well. But there are limitations. Whereas in other countries, you would go to one person. Often it's just one point of contact, and they are the way in to the local authorities, the police, the transport authorities. So that power of convening that London has and should have really is an important part. The other point about that is being an advocate. London should have a powerful voice with government about what London and Britain needs to stage major events. Unlike many countries, we don't have major event legislation. We had it for London 2012. We haven't got it for the Rugby World Cup. We haven't got it for most other events. And we certainly don't have it for the annual events. It's complicated without that sort of legislation. I would hope that London would help the industry to advocate for that, and I know that's being considered at the moment by DCMS as to whether legislation should be in place.
Thanks, Nick. Did you want to add something? Yeah, Mark and then Esther.
Sorry, thank you. There were 3 things I just wanted to add. So one of the huge successes of 2012 in the games themselves was TfL. Who got people round London and made it a big success. I'd make a plug for thinking about Stratford and Stratford Station, which is use has grown exponentially since then, actually, in thinking about how we work on making transport links work, and I'm sure the councillor will have a similar view about Wembley as well. The second thing, though, is, I mean, we've got a major sports group where we meet with the GLA and London and Partners and think about future bids. We would continue and want to support London putting its name forward, getting in the ring, so that we're applying for future events to come here. And then I think thirdly is just ensuring that, and it's probably a bit towards what Nick was saying, that we can be joined up. The 2012 Games, as Nick said, we had legislation, we had planning powers. The 4 boroughs worked collectively to make sure that they got the best outcome from it, and it is just being able to actually pull those strands together.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Did you have something to add, Esther?
I would just echo that. I think major events are built on partnerships, and the importance of being able to convene those partnerships cannot be underestimated. I would say that both in the decision-making and the clarity of why London wants to support certain events is really important. London is and can be a great partner, not only from the people on the table, but plenty of others around. I think it's really important that the city is clear on, does it want a portfolio of events that deliver a lot of different benefits, or does it want to go for certain returns? And that's where I would probably drive the city a bit more, to be really clear about the reasons why it would say yes or no to the support that it would provide to certain events.
Mohammed, are you indicating as well? Thanks, Esther.
I think the convening part is truly important, right? Because the point it was just made about sort of the individual boroughs as well, right? And if you do have an organisation that can bring people, partners together, right, and where we can actually work together to sort of promote the benefits of London and the different elements and the different parts of London, it truly makes a big difference. And the point about TfL, I truly have to say, when we have, we had limited the Wembley Stadium to 34, 36 events in a year. We've now increased the capacity up to 54 events in a year, right? And that's because we know that there's so much interest coming in from all over, right? And if it wasn't for the likes of TfL working with us in order to make sure that the capacity on the trains and the buses and everything else was there, right, we would truly struggle in order to host those events as well, right? And then the impact would be so much more greater on our residents as well.
Thanks very much. I found myself on one occasion on the way home on a train that turned out to be stopping at Norwood Junction, which is next to Selhurst Park. So I'm very familiar with quite how many people can pack onto one train going to a football match, plus me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Chair. Nick and Mark, to what extent do local suppliers in London benefit from the event organisers buying their services and products? And mind you, I'm an Assembly member that sort of, don't give me the fluffy stuff, give me the hard facts. If you've got numbers, I'd love to have them.
I've actually given the officers our economic impact study, so you can have a look at that, and it's got the full figures in there about our suppliers that benefit. From our point of view, especially with our sustainability remit, we do try to favour our local suppliers if we can. There are one or two occasions where it's very specialised services and we're having to go abroad, but largely our suppliers are London-based, and that's good business sense because we know that we're going to have a regular relationship with them. It's also we're building that capacity. I think the events industry if you look at the events industry, it has not been the most diverse industry around, and so trying to favour organisations that follow our standards and our requirements, you can do that more directly with local suppliers. And certainly, we've adopted some of the targets and that have come from the GLA, things like sustainable travel, as an example. All of those sorts of things do help if you've got local suppliers and you're able to have that established relationship with them.
Thank you. So I think that the number of jobs on the park since 2012, and remember we went through transforming the park to get it ready. We've been doing development in terms of housing and East Bank more recently, and then running the venues in the park itself. It's somewhere in the region of 64,000. They're not all permanent jobs. But just looking at the park and venues, and leaving aside the stadium for now, there's something like 500 full-time jobs that have been created and are permanent as a result of that. But more widely than that, we get, on average, a visit a week. So 50 visits a year from countries around the world who are interested in how we staged the 2012 Games and how we are delivering legacy. And that provides the opportunity for British firms to get involved. I was recently in Vancouver and Toronto along with a British Trade Mission to introduce British companies over there. They were looking forward to Taylor Swift arriving, but they've also got the FIFA 26 World Cup arriving as well. And in fact, they're back over on a return visit in 2 weeks' time. And so, to take a very direct example, if you look at the team in LOCOG, London Organising Committee, that looked after the park and venues then, they set up a company on the back of it, Trivandi. They are thriving and giving advice all around the world and similarly, in terms of transportation advice, companies like Steer and so on, Momentum, they're all out there being chosen from other organisations and countries that are looking to host major events because they did it in London, and London was seen to be a successful model.
Thanks, Mark. You're brave to mention Taylor Swift in the current context. Councillor Butt, I think this question is for you. And by the way, thank you, Mark and Nick. Those very comprehensive answers, and Nick, definitely look at those numbers afterwards. Councillor Butt, so London and Partners data from 2021 suggests that 45% of event organisers spending, including both cultural and major sporting events, based on local suppliers. So only 45% were in London. So given your role as a London Borough leader, you know, obviously you want what's best for your residents, and electorally, I'm sure it's very good at election time. You know, what sort of conversations do you have with event organisers, Wembley Stadium, others say, but look, come on, guys, you know, can you perhaps look at this local business or that local business? This is what the specialties are. This is what they can do. How do you drum up business how do you drum up supplies for local businesses, things like that?
There's a couple of things, actually. One, we have a regular catch-up with the Wembley Stadium, right, and we make sure we understand some of the issues and problems we face at each event, so we can tackle that. But we also have two other forums, right, where we invite local businesses, right, to come in to have a conversation with us as a council, right, and the stadium as well, right? So we're always making sure that local businesses are part and parcel of the conversation, and they're sitting inside the room, right, with the management team of the stadium, Mark Bullock and everybody else, right, Chris, Brian, you name them, right. We make sure, right, it's not just it's somebody further down the chain. It's the top team that sits with the businesses, right, and they're given every opportunity, right, not just to have on event days as well, actually, because the stadium and the arena are used outside of those event days as well, and they also hold seminars and meetings and everything else, right? So we make sure that they're tapped into the supply chain as well, and then we also have a conversation with the FA, the stadium, and to say to them, right, that they need to make sure, right, that they're also employing local people in the at all times. It's not just that on those event days at those local events, right? I mean, my son, right, when he's in between sort of jobs in university and employment, right, managed to get himself a student job there as well, and that actually sort of helped him. And I think we on an event day, there's 1,800 local people who are engaged and employed there as well. And then if you factor in all the other elements around the supply chain, right, it could be as much as almost 5,000 people that could be employed, right, from the direct benefits of what we do there.
No, and that's a very helpful answer, actually, because one of the things in this place, lots of people say, oh yes, because of the work we've done, we've got X number of suppliers in, X number of people employed. Clearly what you've demonstrated as a leader of a council, you're using your convening powers to, and I don't think I'm mischaracterising what you've said, which is you're using your convening powers with the stadium and Wembley to get people in, local suppliers use local people employed. And you can draw a line, can you, between the work that you and the council have done and the number of jobs that have been provided and local supplies used?
Absolutely. Look, when we have those meetings, right, we absolutely make it crystal clear to the stadium, the FA, right, that first and foremost, right, they start with Brent, okay, right, because as you rightly pointed out, obviously it makes sense for me, right, to be promoting Brent in the best possible light, and I can assure you, right, I'm not one of those individuals, right, that will take, fraff. from people, right? I just want to know how many people are being employed, right? If I can give you another concrete example where our Children and Young People's Department, right, works actively, right, with the stadium, right, to get people in, right, who have special needs, right, to make sure that they are given training, they are given that support, they are given the opportunities, right, to get into employment, right, to build their skills, right. But our works team, Brent Works and Brent Start, actively works with the stadium, right, to make sure, right, people are placed in there. Brent Start and Brent Works also work with local businesses, right, and they're, when we talk about the London Living Wage, the Good Work Standard and everything else, right, those are part and parcel of the conversation, and that's what we expect from the stadium and the FA to be working with.
No, thank you. That seems to be very good news for the people of Brent. To Esther and Nick, and I apologise, I can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but one of you sort of preempted the question, so please don't repeat if you have. How do major sporting events increase London's soft power and global appeal?
I'll start because I think it was Nick that potentially mentioned soft power straight away. Yeah. Look, certainly at a national strategic level, when we're looking at what events we want to host in the UK, one of the things that we make particular attention to is whether there are opportunities to build relations with other nations and whether there is a soft power opportunity alongside those events. I think London has historically done a good job with this, particularly if we go back to aligning some of the things it did around the Tour de France in 2010, so the start of bikes and bike lanes and that kind of, but also the start of a strong relationship with the city of Paris and with the nation of France. And I do think there are increasing opportunities for some of these types of events to build as many relations as you can.
I don't think it will happen accidentally. I think you've actually got to set out what it is you're trying to achieve with that and go after it. I'm not entirely sure there is a central thought process about what it is you're trying to achieve and which events, because the event organisers, with the best will in the world, that's not our long-term aim. It will help, but it's not something that we're being charged with by our stakeholders necessarily. So does Britain, does London have a view of what it is trying to achieve, and then deciding which of those events can help with that? I think that might help with that, and certainly I think that's a role for the GLA and London and Partners, giving it some strategic direction rather than leaving it up to individual organisations.
I think just as a quick one then to both of you, and do you think therefore, obviously the stakeholders, you've got more than enough going on doing your actual jobs to put on what you do and managing your own organisations, so therefore is it something the government should be looking more towards to coordinate, get best practice and experience and sell that, as part of GB Limited?
I think they've got to work with us. I don't think we can say it's entirely up to them. It's got to be a partnership. If I take the example of last year, we held a sustainable events conference around the London Marathon. We took over a facility in central London. We had hundreds of people coming in from around the country and the world to talk about sustainable events. And that was an example, I think, of working with our partners to try and establish Britain as thought leaders on sustainability, as an example. So it can't be just one or other, it has to be together.
I think it's about having that conversation early on about whose responsibility it is. I think there are different agencies involved in event delivery who can take responsibility for it, and it's identifying what you want to see as the returns most significantly from an event. Could be it's a free-to-attend event. It's going to cause you more disruption, but it's going to give you a significant trade link to a different country.
I'll just add one thing, if I might, and that is that a lot of the thinking around this has tended to be around the so-called calendar events, the events which you're bidding for. And what I'd make a plea is actually the regular annual events, the Wimbledons, the London Marathons, the FA Cup finals, that's here the whole time. Let's not leave those out of the calculations.
But treat them as the anchors, sort of, rather than...
Absolutely, absolutely.
OK, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. And you've mentioned Wimbledon, which is right in the middle of my constituency on the boundary between Merton, which is the borough where the grounds are, and Wandsworth, which has the nearest tube station to Wimbledon. So 500,000 visitors pour into Wimbledon, who've gone out of their way behind walls within the complex now to have as many food outlets as possible. They don't employ anybody locally at all because they bring in the Army, the Navy and the Air Force to steward in the grounds, and then they have massive queues of people who, if they're very lucky, might get a cheap return rather than paying £200 to go and watch tennis on centre court or number one. So there's a lot of disquiet locally. And in fact, 25,000 people just signed a petition against an expansion to the other side of the road because they also think this is a ploy by Wimbledon to get hold of the local road. So it's not a happy situation. Clearly, it is one of the 4 global, Grand Slam tennis events. So we don't need to worry too much about the publicity because I think it gets quite a lot of that already. But, and I'm going to come to Esther first of all, because I actually think it's a really, really sharp example. It's pretty, obviously, locally for me, it's a very, very difficult one. To what extent can major sporting events aid social integration and cohesion? What, if any, is the evidence for this? Because locally, obviously, there's a very strong feeling that Wimbledon doesn't even try.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that there is so much disquiet currently, because I'm sure it doesn't make your life any easier.
No.
I think from a major sports events, there is still an opportunity here, and we would always advocate that there's an opportunity to maximise the economic returns, but also build the societal cohesion. It feels like there's potentially a missed opportunity there to not be doing more for the local community, whether that be in the days outside of the event, particularly with a facility that is there for a longer period of time, or whether that be for allowing access to for the local community to see the event when it's there. I think you do see quite a lot of examples, particularly when there is, and Nick may also say from a more annual event, he may have a slightly different perspective. I think obviously being involved much more with the bid for events, there is always a strategic discussion about where you might want to make that impact and where's the best place to do it. It would seem to me that there would still remain an opportunity for those events that are resident in the UK to still do that. Events are a huge platform moment for any location, whether it be in your street, your nation or your city, and therefore being able to do as much as you can to maximise that return, whether it be economic, societal or for the community, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. Unfortunately, the All England Lawn Tennis Club seem to think that just maximising profits for themselves is the only aspect of running their event, hence this growth of all these food outlets inside. So even the local shops, the local business forum in Southfields and also the businesses in Wimbledon town centre, the very expensive restaurants in Wimbledon Village do very nicely out of it, thank you very much. Think the Ivy as opposed to Leon. That's the difference. So there is a real issue that has grown up now, and I think will get worse with the possible building of the extra 8,000-seater stadium on the other side of the road. Currently, local people have decided to JR it. That's how strongly they're feeling about it. I want to turn to you now, Councillor Butt, Mohammed Butt, because what you were just describing to my colleague, Assemblymember Georgiou, I think is entirely different. I've been coming to Wembley for years. It has massively changed. How have you made sure that it's got that sort of greater integration with the local communities and maximised local communities' involvement with the stadium, which I think has been so lacking with the Wimbledon complex?
For that, I think you are right. I mean, we took the opportunity when the new stadium was the vision in order to make sure that if we're going to be having a new stadium, right, we need to change the offer as well, right? That sort of Brent has for its residents, and part of the conversation has been, right, how do we make sure the residents and the businesses, right, are absolutely critical in those conversations, and not just at the stadium level, but also in the council, because obviously being the representatives of Brent as well, the people always come to us if there are any issues. The regular meetings have been part and parcel of that journey as well. People have been involved in the transformation of Brent as well. When we've had the master plans, and we've had honestly the conversations with the residents, right, and the businesses, right, because businesses were worried that anything that in there will take business away from them and the high street. And we had to make it, make a promise to everyone, right, that this is not going to happen. So the Business Traders Association that was set up, right, also allows us to have separate conversations, right, outside of the event days, right, and just to make sure we're also making sure the regeneration also benefits them on the high road as well, and further afield, and also I think the conversation with residents also has to be about how they will benefit as well, right? Because there's no point having a national stadium where most of the residents can't even attend some of those events, right? And the commitment from the stadium always has been to make sure hundreds, if not thousands, of tickets are also given out to local residents, right? Community groups have set themselves up, right? That they come to the meetings, that they're listed, right, and they attend those events as well. Obviously, depending on how many tickets we can squeeze out of the organisers as well, right? But I can assure you, right, we try to squeeze very hard, right, to make sure, right, the residents actually are able to attend those meetings. Those events, right, and I have to be honest, right, the relationship and the offerings from the stadium has actually sort of benefited a lot of the residents. There's now a trust and confidence, right, in the relationships we have. Because if they weren't involved, I think the noise and the pushback would have been 10 times harder and 10 times worse than what it is at the moment, right? And I think the other thing is, how do we make sure our schools are also involved, and the young people understand how we work with the stadium, and how they can benefit from some of the opportunities there as well. Once you give a politician a microphone, it's easier, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just so interesting what you're saying about the building of that trust and confidence, because actually I would imagine, and obviously Wembley is probably more active more frequently throughout the year. Obviously Wimbledon's very, very concentrated, 500,000 people in 2 weeks. But you're having events there all the time, and I would imagine they're probably noisier as well. Although obviously there is an ooh from tennis when you see an amazing volley, but I don't think it's quite as noisy, and there is a lot of please be quiet. So it's not the same for football or other events, is there, at Wembley?
Just on that point, honestly, right, the noise levels are so acutely monitored, right?
Yes.
Our teams from the council set up base in the stadium with them as well, and we have the best-in-class sort of team that is set up, right, that works with the stadium, works with the council, works with the police, TfL. Everyone's part and parcel of that team, right? And we in order to give that trust and confidence to our residents and businesses, like, that we actually do want to support them as well, right? We've had to set that up, right? And if we didn't have that in place, right, I think the residents, right, would have voted me out a long time ago, right? But to be honest, right, honestly, expecting the best from every single individual who sits around that table for our residents, right, is the single best thing that we've done in order to make sure, right, the impacts and the positive impacts are realised by everyone as well.
I think that's really important. I could ask Mark, so I'm sure he'll tell me that what goes on at LLDC and the the legacy that's been left there is also really positive. But do you mind if I just come to Esther and just say, are there any examples of really good practice beyond what Councillor Butt was just describing in Brent? Obviously, I've described potentially the other end of the feeling. I mean, obviously, Wimbledon do some bits with schools and some bits with cheaper tickets and so on, but it's just people feel that it isn't actually sort of best practice at the moment. Are there any other examples? And then maybe Mark can tell us about his example as well.
I think I'm actually going to give you a bit of an example about where I've seen other cities generate civic pride. So when Councillor Butt was talking, I was thinking about the pride that actually it feels that has come from the residents in a facility, which almost makes it feel like it's their own on their doorstep. And I think there's a if I actually look at, for example, the city of Liverpool, it's built a huge civic pride through major event hosting that led up to Eurovision, having had World Netball Championships and World Gymnastics Championships, events that are quite small, but in a venue that showcases what people can see from its area, but it's generated civic pride that's allowed the disruption to be acceptable. Why am I saying that? I guess I'm saying it that I think that overall environment that you create is really important to drive some of the sentiment and the happiness and the opportunity that events can provide. But it's hard fought, as we've heard, and is potentially easily lost. So I think I would look potentially at some other cities about how they have developed their strategic objectives and the return that they want.
Interesting. Mark, do you want to talk us a bit about sort of best practice and maximising the involvement of local communities? Because as with Wembley, I mean, the changes, I used to work in the centre of Stratford. I used to regularly go to Wembley because we had an office up there. But I mean, they're just enormous, aren't they, the changes that we've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe there's 4 points I could sort of quickly go over. So one is around community engagement. So we have in place, and I have had in place for the last 10 years, a parks panel where we meet bi-monthly now. We look at things which are coming up, so things like planning permissions and so on, sit down with local residents to actually understand what their concerns are. We have a youth board called Elevate, and in fact, 2 of their members now sit on the main board and are there. And we've got someone who has started on the youth board, left school, went through university, got a job, and has now come back and is on the main board as a member herself in her own right, in her specialism. We've done a lot of work recently around designing spaces for women and girls and around women's safety, but also actually saying we should be proactively thinking about how women and girls use spaces, because it's not the same as men. Design a big open space. Men will get out a ball, put down 4 jumpers and start a game of football. Women actually will coalesce more to smaller spaces, otherwise men just crowd them out of the space. So that's one of the areas that we've been working on as well. And that leads on to co-designing with the community. So looking at particular working with teenage girls. So we're opening up in a new play area where actually we've got teenage girls to think about what is it that works for them. They're interested in shelter. They're interested in actually not benches that go along with each other, actually benches that are opposite each other so they can have a conversation. And it's just small interventions which make a difference to people's lives. I think then second thing would be around something like the London Aquatic Centre. I mentioned the number of people who swim there. That's because it's got a policy of tagging its pricing to the local boroughs, so people can afford to swim there. It's a treat, and in fact was recently voted the best place to swim in the world, but we've managed to keep the prices affordable. We also look to give tickets away for events, small numbers, but we try to do that for local people. And the third thing, going back to something that was mentioned earlier, was we have in our contracts for our operators something called priority themes, which actually focus on things like local employment. And I think I mentioned the 450 full-time jobs a moment ago. At the Copper Box in London Aquatic Centre, they employ 256 of those jobs. 86% of those 256 are from residents from the growth boroughs, so the 4 boroughs the park sits in, and 48% are from ethnic minority groups. And we regularly report, and it's that good old thing of what gets measured gets done. And so they've got KPIs which actually hold them to. The final thing I wanted to say was just...
Don't mention that business about having so many people from ethnic minorities or meeting equality, diversity or inclusion targets in front of President Trump, for goodness sake. Planes will fall out of the sky or something, you know.
I doubt he's tuning in. But I just wanted to give some evidence from our... because we do an annual survey of people visiting the park, and the figures show that 93% of local people agree with the statement. It was the right decision to invest in the Olympics. 92% agree that the park is an asset for the whole community. And again, 92% say, I'm proud of the Olympic legacy. The area is changing for the better. And so there's the evidence that actually, if you listen, you stick to the promises you made, and continue to work with the community, they will be supportive of where you get to.
Some really fantastic examples, I think, from both Wembley and from Stratford of good practice, and I think Esther, thank you for pointing towards outside London. Nick, was there something you wanted to add?
I'm just going to add something. First of all, obviously I'm disappointed to hear what you say about the feeling for Wimbledon. I'm a trustee of Wimbledon Foundation, which is the club's charity. We give away over £3 million a year, the vast majority of which is going to local projects and local schemes, as well as other projects within the area. But it leads me on to about a line of sight, about how can we tell that story better about the benefits that events bring to local people. You know, we at London Marathon, we've got a joint fund with the GLA called Go London, where we co-invest with them and with Sport England, giving away over £1.5 million a year together, bringing loads of different groups. I think the Assembly might have had a look at that in the past. And then it's a direct, people can see the direct line of sight from hosting the event to the benefits of London. Sometimes we can do it even more directly. We have a children's race, which this year will see 18,000 children taking part. Every child who takes part, their school gets £10 from us. So instead of paying us, we're paying their schools directly to invest in sport and computer equipment. A direct benefit which schools and the parents can see from hosting events. And how do we tell that story? How do we make that connection? That seems to me a really important point.
I think the issues that were raised by others about co-production and co-design and working jointly are points that are extremely well made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And that issue, Nick, about how do we tell the story, I think this is a bit of a theme here, isn't it? I mean, Mark, you talked about the London Aquatic Centre, the best place to swim in the world. You know, was a big fuss that should have been made about it. I think we're too British about these things. We keep quiet about them, you know, and we really need to be, you know, just banging the drum and saying that this is what's happening. So obviously that's a conversation that does need to take place somewhere. We've just listened to our panel talk about the benefits of hosting major events, and we've had some brilliant answers. We're now going to look at the disruption and perhaps adverse impacts on local businesses, a lot of the times unintentional. So I would like Assembly Member Garrett to start, please.
I thought we might have just covered a few of the downsides in the previous line of questioning. Thinking, though, specifically about the sort of disruption to routines that can happen, where you get, you know, a big event happens, and obviously there are people who are specifically drawn to go to that event because it's the thing that they want to go to or that they're excited about. But then there are also people who think, oh, not that again, and they decide to go somewhere else. So you get disruption to residents' sort of travel patterns. And I suppose particularly for you, I think question for you, Councillor. And then also local businesses, again, some might be particularly thriving. I can imagine the sorts of businesses that thrive on match day. And again, some businesses that may not thrive so much because, again, the people who might normally go there get deterred. So what impact do you see in that sense where you know, separate from the positive impact, you've got the sort of the disruption of the normal routines? What kinds of patterns do you see, and what if anything, can be done about it? Or is it just a question of accepting that it is what it is if tens of thousands of people come to Wembley?
I wouldn't say it is what it is, right? I think, you know, the old stadium, right, used to accommodate over 8,000 car parking spaces on site, and that used to cause immense disruption. And the new stadium only has capacity for just under 3,000 car parking spaces, right? So we're sending a message out to everyone who wants to come into Brent, right? And if you're going to hold an event in Brent, right, at the stadium, right, it has to be, right, marketed as a public transport destination. And despite that, obviously people will still choose to come by car or coach. One of the things we have done, we have created an event day zone that allows residents and businesses, right, to be protected as such, right, from the impacts of people coming in with extra vehicles on the streets and on the roads. And what we also do, you know, because people can't delay their weddings or birthdays and everything else, right, just because we have an event. We absolutely make sure, right, that those type of events and functions, right, that are part and parcel of your daily life are not disrupted, right? And we make sure, right, that individuals are able to have, you know, extra permits, right, on those event days to allow them to continue their day-to-day life as well. Yes, when you do have, you know, say 90,000 people on average, I think we have about 78,500 people come to events. There will be some kind of some disruption, but we have to make sure. We do make sure that the mitigations are put in place, right? So the conversations we have with the likes of TfL, where we spoke about how sort of bus routes, stations are managed, how we work with the police and local partners, right? So we try to make sure we know what's going on in Brent as well, right? So and we try to get those early warning dates out into the community, right, so people are aware, so they can hopefully try to plan around, right, some of those events. And I think the point, I think that one of the things that is annoying me a little bit at the moment, right, is in relation to people selling their driveways. And right, I have to admit, right, it's adding extra pressure on the roads. That one resident may say it's only one car that I've put on there, but if loads of other residents on the same street are selling their driveway as well, and you know, and putting extra vehicles, the extra pressure of those even hundreds of vehicles, right, means, right, there is a backlog sometimes on those streets. And there are conversations that we are having with the likes of Steer and the FA and partners within Brent to see how we can further manage some of those issues, right? Because we are trying to make it public transport destination. We understand that there will be times when people who are disabled and everything else will need some of those spaces for them to park, which is absolutely fine. But I think some of those extra vehicles, where now we're facing the extra pressure from those extra vehicles on the street, on people's driveways being sold off, is adding extra nuisance.
Yes, you've reminded me of an excellent book called Order Without Design, which is about how cities, despite how much the people who run them would like it to be true, they are in fact a sort of emergent phenomenon of all the millions of decisions made by all the people in them, and you've given a good example of that. I can see the other people on the panel itching to come on in my question, but in actual fact the next question from my colleague is going to be about how event organisers deal with that disruption. So that's it from me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Plansky.
Event organisers, how do you deal with disruption? Mark, if I can come to... Oh, sorry, Nick, did you indicate? I'll come to you first, Nick.
First of all, you've got to care about it, and if you care about it, then you'll set out to do something about it. We shut 26 miles of roads in one of the busiest cities in the world for London Marathon when we were putting on Ride London, over 100 miles of roads. So we have a dedicated community engagement team whose job it is to make sure that people are disrupted as little as possible. When you're shutting that amount of roads, people will be inconvenienced. It's inevitable. But it's things such as dealing with social care, people who are receiving home visits. So we would organise individual care plans for hundreds of residents affected by our routes. We would individualise care for people who are trying to set up weddings, for businesses, for hotels who want to look at how they're going to get their customers and deliveries in. I sometimes don't see that in other events. They think it's the job of the local authorities or the traffic authorities to be doing that. And I'm pleased to say I think that we're causing the disruption. Yes, we've got to work with local authorities and our traffic partners, but we have a primary responsibility of saying we care about that. We set out to do so. I won't say that we get it right on every occasion, but we certainly give it a good go at doing so.
Thank you. You mentioned Ride London earlier, and you also just talked about shutting down roads and community engagement. I believe Ride London isn't happening this year, and it's floated around in the press because of the Silvertown Tunnel. Can I just check what's happening there?
At the moment, we are in discussion. It certainly won't happen this year. We're in discussions with the GLA and other partners about how it can be brought back, and we've got some very exciting prospects which we're looking at with them. News hopefully will come out soon, but no concrete plans which I can announce today.
I look forward to the news. Can I ask why it didn't happen this year?
There are a number of reasons.
Going to happen this year?
First of all, I should mention that we've worked very closely with the authorities in trying to get it on. We've subsidised that event for a number of years. I mean, we've subsidised it to a very substantial, nearly £1 million over the years. So we've got to make sure it works financially as well as working for London. And if you can't make it work for both of you, then it can't happen.
Thank you. My ears pricked up slightly then because you said we've tried to work closely with authorities.
And we do work very closely with the authorities. So many authorities in London and Essex that we have to deal with.
Has there been a particular authority that's been difficult, particularly with the financial
I think
issues?
there's some local authorities, some individual councillors might see it differently from others, but generally the event happened not despite all, but because of the fantastic support we had from local authorities.
Okay, well, I hope to be joining Ride London again next year.
We hope you can.
Mark, could I ask you what you're doing to counteract potential adverse effects on local residents or businesses?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of three levels here. In planning, there is something which is a safety advisory group, and there you've got the statutory authorities, so the local authority, the police, ambulance, we've got TfL in that as well, and the local landowners. So the people who are most going to be immediately disrupted. Beyond that, there's a series of partner groups, and so if I think about an Olympic Park, Stadium has primacy, so they would be leading the safety advisory group along with the local authority. But you've got a whole series of other venues round about it. We have the ABBA Arena, we have the London Aquatic Centre, the Copper Box Arena, the Velodrome in the north. And them, along with the local schools and universities, and as of last Thursday, Sadler's Wells opening up on site. And maybe we didn't shout enough about that last week either, but we should be shouting about. There are partner calls with each of them collectively to see actually what the impact is, where crowds are going, what times roads will be closing, what times they'll be reopening, how that will be called out. And then we do a site-wide communication, which actually goes out beyond to residents and everyone to make sure that everyone's aware. Now, it works, I think, fantastically well for football because we have a regular pattern. When we have an irregular event, so if I give the example of the World Athletics Championships in 2019, when we had 10 days of events, one after the other, and we had a morning session and an evening session, actually, we realised actually that we needed to get a bit more ahead of it than that regular pattern, because actually moving one crowd out as you move the other one in meant you took more space out than you do just for a regular event. So I wouldn't want to claim we've got it perfect. We've got plans that seem to work and keep the number of complaints down. But it means, like, for example, having universities on the park, students arrive for Freshers' Week. I don't know whether students still have Freshers' Weeks anymore, but they arrive and they're coming in a weekend for the lectures to start or for Freshers' Week to start. If you've got a match that weekend, then we worked with UCL to say, right, okay, on the Sunday, we won't have anyone arriving, so we need the students to be arriving on the Saturday because they were going to be inside the protected zone for the football.
Thank you. And what steps are you taking to reduce environmental impacts?
So a number of steps. I mean, I think one of those is you may have heard that there's recently been a grant, and it's not a grant, it's a loan from the GLA to put solar PV on the roof of the stadium. We're working up similar bids for the Cobra Box Arena and for 3 Mills Film Studio, which we run as well. We have a district heat network on the park, and we're looking at how we decarbonise that district heat network. And we're also through the use of heat pumps and recovery of heat, and we're also on the wider sustainability issue. Then we obviously manage the park in a sustainable way to ensure that it provides a safe and welcoming place for people. And again, I mentioned some of our visitor stats. During COVID, and we measured some of the residents who were visiting then, and 70% of them said it helped with their physical health to have the park and access to it, and actually 73% said it helped with their mental health, having that green space to be able to be in. The park, as you may know, has been built with a floodplain to protect 5,000 homes south of the park. When I took over responsibility for the park in 2013, I was told it would flood once in 100 years. It flooded 10 times in the first year, and floods on a regular basis since. But we managed that in the reed beds, and as a result, we've seen a huge improvement in terms of the biodiversity of the site and the flora and fauna that's there as well.
I cycle through every day on my commute and always appreciate the green space. Thank you. Nick, if I can turn to you on environmental impacts, and I suppose a slight supplementary question too, that with kind of cooler winters or freezing winters and warmer summers, what kind of thinking is the marathon doing into how to protect athletes or citizens in the future?
So first of all, we have sustainable goals, which we publish. We publish our outputs and what we're trying to do. We've got thousands of people travelling a long way to take part, and that we have to take that account. We offset all international travel as part of our environmental sustainability. In terms of the climate, yes, it's a major risk to major events that, especially when you're an endurance event, that the climate is getting warmer. We're in a position that we've positioned the event in late spring. Even in Britain at the moment, it's a little chilly to train at the moment, and I'm afraid Councillor Garrett hasn't got the benefit of knowing that for this year, but another year, I'm sure. Other events in the world which are held in September, it's not great to be training through the summer for some of those for marathons. So when you hold events and how you hold the events, that's got to be part of your thinking. But it starts from having sustainable goals and putting money into this. Being audited, we're a member of the Council for Sustainable Sport, which is an external audit reporting on what standards we're reaching. Because I don't think you can audit yourself and say you're doing a great job. I think you do need some external scrutiny and being willing to publish your baseline and publishing your journey is a vital part of public scrutiny on this.
Can I just check the Council of Sustainable Sport? Who are they accountable to? Like, who set them up?
Well, they were set up. It's an international group which has been set up. It's got all sorts of people who are members of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Esther, just wanted to ask about British volleyball, actually. This Assembly passed a motion last year to try and find a home for British volleyball. Do you know if there's been any updates in that at all?
Gosh, I don't know whether there's been a specific home for British volleyball. Was that for their events or their performance centre, or a bit of both?
I think both, yeah, okay. Exactly that.
No, I'm not really aware of that very much at all. I do know they've been looking at establishing an event somewhere more recently, I think even looking at Battersea for something there. And I do know that Volleyball England are based in Loughborough currently, is where their offices are.
Okay, thank you very much. And then a final question for anyone on the panel. It's probably been answered, so please, only if you've got something new to add, but what are the main logistical and organisational challenges posed by organising a major sports event in London. So are there any logistical challenges that haven't been mentioned? Nick.
I just mentioned that something on the horizon, if I might,
Sure,
because we talked about what is there now, but there are a couple coming down the horizon. One is the implementation of Martin's Law, if it comes into force, and how that is going to affect major events, especially major events who don't have a very simple footprint of a stadium. That's going to be a major challenge for how we deal with that. And the second one I just mentioned on horizon scanning is police charges. The police in Britain are currently looking at trying to think about reversing the effect of the Court of Appeal decision in, I think it was the Ipswich case, wasn't it? And trying to see whether or not they therefore can charge for policing costs outside the envelope of an event. And that will have if that comes in, it will have a major effect upon London and Britain's attractiveness for hosting events.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nick, I thought you got treated unfairly. I don't know how much more sustainable you can be with a bunch of people jogging for 26 miles, but I don't know if people remember George Osborne and Ed Balls. I was recently listening to a podcast they both now present, and one of the things that they said was that, you know, there aren't many major industries in the UK that we have that are, you know, number one, we're world renowned for, and number two, extremely profitable. Well, obviously, footballing, you know, Premier League, FA is one of those things. Councillor Butt's ears have pricked up, and once again, we come back to Wembley Stadium. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, look, the government's ambition, I mean the Bank of England / growth forecast, but the one way to get the UK growing again is obviously major sporting events. I don't think that's a particularly controversial view in expanding franchises. But obviously, a big problem with that is infrastructure. Obviously, we've broached around TfL and talking about sustainable travel and all of that. But infrastructure will require, you know, TfL, quite frankly, doesn't have the money to do it, and they've sort of confessed that. They can do it at a piecemeal level because they manage the whole infrastructure for London. But in terms of lobbying and getting sort of the private sector to put that infrastructure in place to increase capacity, to increase growth, to benefit London, to benefit boroughs, to benefit the countries, how do we go about that? And is it something that we can look forward to on the horizon? I appreciate that none of you represent these bodies, but if someone thinks they might be able to answer that, be helpful.
I mean, not from a sporting perspective, but if I look at somewhere like the ABBA Arena, which is on an interim site in the park that will eventually become housing, there you have a private investor who's willing to invest in the arena and in the developing the product, and they put money into the station, they put money into upgrading the electricity supply around the area, they've put a little bit of money into roads, they've been sustainable in terms of supporting local communities. They recently had 2,500 school kids in there free. I don't want to say it was free. There might have been a small charge for it, but actually definitely well below the levels of a ticket price. And they're private investors who recognise actually they've got a model that would work, but they've taken the risk and taken the initiative. So I think there are, if there's a right product, the opportunity to do something.
Yeah, and Mark, I mean, you've given a very good answer, but I think that's quite a piecemeal approach. And I guess, so if we're looking at, you know, Emirates Stadium, they Arsenal supporter, you know, they wanted to go from 60,000 to 80,000, but the response back was, you're going to have to foot the bill. And we're talking tens, if not hundreds of millions, to build the local infrastructure in the area. Mark, I don't know if you want to come back on that, but Councillor Butt, it might be something, because obviously you've had massive development going on around Wembley Stadium, which has, of course, put additional pressure on the transport system. So both of you briefly could just sort of cover what I'm getting at, would be helpful.
Let me make a flipping comment, which tends to hundreds of millions. Is probably two strikers, isn't it, for Arsenal? But less flippantly, you're right. I think there is and I mentioned Stratford Station in an earlier response. I think that the public sector gets looked to invest in these things, where the private sector is getting the benefit of it. And as I said, ABBA had to put money into putting Mill Lane Station as part of their deal. Actually, the private sector should be also making an investment in the infrastructure that goes with it.
It's a double-edged sword that you're talking about. I mean, look, when councils, the GLA, TfL, everyone gets together in order to make sure, right, the infrastructure that we needed around the stadium was there. It was obviously there was we also had the vision of the master plan coming forward for the development that was taking place, right? So the opportunity, we took the opportunity of the regeneration of the 15,000 homes, 10,000 jobs that were coming there, because we knew that would actually sort of come in, and you can see the benefits of what we have at the moment. Right, and I think as public organisations, yes, right, we are slightly stymied in the current situation around funding, financing, and everything else. But if we're asking sort of private individuals to come in, private companies to come in, right, they're not going to do it for free, are they? Right. So the impact is going to be, right, what is they ask, right? So for example, I mean, the conversations a few years ago about Wembley Stadium being sold off or not being sold off, right? If say for example, say the stadium had been sold off, right? How many events would they then be holding in order to make sure, right, that they're getting that return in that locality in what they've made? At the moment, right, it's only 54 events in a year, right? And then most of those are then during the course of the summer period, where all the music events, etc., take place, right? So if you're then going to be asking private developers and investors to come in, right, at what cost, right, to everybody else, right? Yes, there may be benefit from, sort of, say, the investment from business and opportunities, but what about the impact on the communities and the wider sort of elements as well, right? So I think we do need to have a sort of a much deeper conversation about what that investment looks like, what it means, and what the potential outcomes could be.
Well, I think just on that point, you've hit the nail on the head, because with the greatest respect, we've got a growing population. The government is saying that London needs to significantly increase its housing output. But yet on the flip side, we want more growth, more events in London. So I guess my point is, how do you accommodate all of that? And I think that goes back to your point of, Councillor Butt, how do we have those conversations with government? Because effectively, it's saying that we want to have our cake and eat it too. So, but then equally, let me ask you this: would the residents of Brent say the trade-off is, yeah, we'll have more major events, but with more housing, more pressure on local infrastructure, including on the transport network, we're willing to have that trade-off? I mean, what do you think your residents would think about that? I appreciate, I'm not trying to put you in a tricky position. No. It's a broad philosophical point.
I think you also have to remember, look, as a place, right, as London, right, we do need to grow. Okay, right, and the one thing about sort of standing still, right, you lose out. Okay, if you're not making the investments in new infrastructure or new opportunities, right, then as London, as the UK, we're going to lose out, right, because there are going to be other opportunities, right, that people will take avail, right, in other countries, right, rather than investing here. I'd rather make sure, right, that we're investing in London, investing in places like Brent and Arsenal, right, or anywhere else, right, but in order to make sure, right, that we are the hub as such, right, that where people do take a look at London, right, as a place where they can invest, right, where they will get a return, right, and there are opportunities, right, for that ambition and aspiration for our people in London as well. So when it comes to, say, creating homes, homes employment and skills are the bedrock and the foundation of giving everyone, be it in London or outside of London, right, the opportunity to succeed. If we have people who can succeed and can take the opportunities from the homes and the jobs and the employment opportunities we're creating, it can only be a good thing. Right? But yes, right, the balance, right, between what residents may want or may not want, right, is something that we do need to make sure that the communication, the engagement, the interaction is explained in a way that people understand what they will benefit from.
But I think, just a final point, everything you've said, I don't think anyone really disagrees with. But those are all good intentions. That is a final place that we want to be. I think my point is, because look, also most of us have been or are councillors, you know, getting a developer to contribute enough 106 or SIL to satisfy what we want is near impossible. And even then, 106, you know, you as leader have got other priorities in other parts of the borough where you think that money may very well be better spent. Because it's never ring-fenced. You know, I'm saying you may be a well-behaved leader of a council, but many aren't. So I guess my point is that we want that growth, we want these additional events which bring in more money, local investment and jobs, but if the government's not going to give us the money, if the GLA is not going to give us the money, TfL aren't going to do it, how do we do it?
Well, just one small point. Well, I mean, look, right, the amount of regeneration that's taking place in Brent, Wembley, Alberton, South Kilburn, Staples Corner, right? Okay, and then you take a look at, right, the amount of mayoral SIL that we contribute, right, towards the success of London. Right, and the point I'm making is, right, it's not just about me and Brent, right? I want the whole of London to succeed, right? And if I'm getting some of that positive benefit in Brent, right, with those homes, with those businesses, with those community spaces, with those open spaces, where people will actually come in and see and use, right? And then and those developers are contributing. Right, through SIL and mayoral SIL, in order to make sure, right, that some of the infrastructure projects, HS2, Crossrail, everything else, Elizabeth Line, right, we're all contributing to all of these, right, through the various contributions that we're making, right. So the success of one borough, and neighbouring boroughs is the success of London, right? And the success of Brent at the moment, right, is dependent on growth. It's dependent on change. It's dependent on renewal, right? And if that stops, right, it's not going to benefit anyone, right? The success of what we have in Wembley Stadium, the success of what we have in Wembley Arena, right? If we lose those opportunities to other places outside outside of the UK, right, we're all going to be the poorer for it as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I have a final question to panel one, quick fire round. So the question is, what more can the Mayor do to attract major sports events to London and support their delivery? And Esther, if I could start with you, please.
I think I would reiterate points that I've made before. I think that the GLA should be clear about what they want from major events. What is their prioritisation? Is it about pure economics? Is it about the local communities? Is it about an international or global impact? I think it should manage that and achieve all of those goals through staging a portfolio of events, each one that are able to lead and deliver different things for the city. I'd like to see the GLA continuing to convene and work. You've heard that unanimously across the panel today, and just like to keep working in partnership with them.
Thank you. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm probably going to say it slightly differently. I think Linford Christie used to say he started on the B of the bang. I think what we need to do if we want to think about delivering strategically is we need to think about the B of bid. And we need to be thinking right at the beginning, what is the outcome we want from bidding for these events? Let's not be thinking about the event, but what we think the outcome beyond that is. And that's the only way you'll develop a sustainable strategy, sustainable legacy as part of it.
Thank you. Nick?
I won't repeat anything that's been said. What I would say is that I was on the board of Sport England and UK Sport for many years. One of the things we tried to do was take a strategic view of what facilities were available for sports. You know, you've talked about a home for British volleyball, many other sports, about what is there available. The reason that Copper Box has been so successful is that there's a dearth of facilities at that sort of level. So having a strategic view, and this is not just for sport. You know, we're very lucky. We're just by Excel, but actually London is not particularly well off when it comes to exhibition space. You compare it to most of the major European cities, and then you say, well, actually, how can we host so many events, you know, Frankfurt Book Fair or many other things that can't come to Britain because we don't have those facilities. So taking a strategic view of what facilities London needs, both for sport and exhibition, I think would be a good starting point.
Thank you. Mo.
I think, for me, if you go around the world, right, it doesn't. Most places now have some kind of accommodation levy on hotels and all that. I think I would welcome that, because that's something I'm taking a look at in Brent through the Business Improvement District. Right, we're having conversations with all the hotels and partners there as well. I think a ticket levy would also help support some of the infrastructure conversations we're talking about. And I think the investment that it still needs to continue, just making sure transport is key and part and parcel of the conversation going forward. And I think the last thing I would say to every single one of you is that look, if people want to come to Brent and take a look at what we do and how we do things, right? We have the Carabao Cup coming soon. More than honestly, right? Open invitation for everyone to come and take a look at how we work with our businesses, how we work with the stadium, how we work with all the different partners, how some of those decisions are made, and how we can positively impact a positive outcome for everyone.
Thank you very much. Bang on time. Brilliant. So we've come to the end of the first session in today's meeting. Thank you very much to our guests for your absolutely brilliant and really interesting responses. Please will you stay just for a couple of minutes, because we'd like to have a photo with you. We'll now adjourn for 10 minutes until 3:40 before welcoming our next panel. Thank you very much. welcome back to today's Economy, Culture and Skills Committee meeting. We continue our investigation into major sporting events in London, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our guests who are participating in the second panel. To Rose Wangan-Jones, who is the Managing Director, Marketing, Destination and Commercial Department of London Partners, and that is an amazing mouthful. To James Fitzgerald, who is from Host City Programmes Director of the Greater London Authority, and to Howard Dorber, Deputy Mayor of London for Business and Growth. Welcome all. I'm going to ask the first question, and what I would ask you to do in your first answer, if you could just spend 10-15 seconds just explaining your role as well and why we've invited you effectively. So my first question is about this section is going to be about the role of the GLA and London and partners in the major sporting events element of the London economy. Why is it important for London to host major sporting events, and what social and economic impacts do these events have? And I would ask if one of your co-panellists have given the answer that you would give, that you move on and not repeat. So, Rose, perhaps you could start.
Sorry. Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Rose Wangan-Jones, and I am indeed the Managing Director for Marketing, Destination and Commercial at London and Partners. London and Partners, as you probably know, is the growth agency for London. In terms of my role, I oversee the Convention Bureau and the destination part, which includes also major events. I think a lot of the reason why major events are very important in terms of for London is that we see it very much. We talked this morning, the earlier panel about soft power, but very important in terms of the economic impact that it brings to the city. It is also really important from a visitor perspective, which is very much the perspective and the lens that London and Partners has in attracting visitors, talent, and indeed investment into the city.
Thank you. James.
Hi, I'm James Fitzgerald, the Host City Programmes Director, and I oversee the Major Sports Events Department, as well as support events for London and the newly formed Host City Department as well, where we look at other areas. I think Rose has covered a lot of it off, but it's really important to get the global attention that major events attract, and it helps us become this vibrant, inclusive and outward-facing city. There's huge benefits to Londoners as well. At the heart of the approach is sport, and the Mayor openly speaks about London being the sporting capital of the world, and that is a huge position that we look to try and maintain by bringing in major sports events to London.
Thank you. Howard.
Good afternoon. I'd agree with all of that. And the point here is, there's positioning London as a global city. It's about driving tourism and visitors, supporting the visitor economy. It's about ensuring that there is a direct economic benefit to Londoners, both directly in terms of employment, but also indirectly in terms of supply, and then developing London's expertise as one of the world's great sporting centres, but also a centre for the experience economy. And that's, from my point of view, that's going to be something in the growth plan. It's one of the sectors we've identified as one of the key growth areas for the city, is to support that growing experience economy, which is not just the hosting events, but then all the businesses that go to support that as well. So for me, it's one of our sectors that we're very good at and something we can grow.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. I appreciate this is to all, but if once again, as the Chair instructed earlier, I'm sure some of you heard it, the answer's been given already, please don't repeat. So what is the role of the Mayor and London and Partners in attracting and supporting major sports events in London?
Shall I start? Yeah. Well, I think the crucial thing here is the convening role as the as the lead agency to bring together all the partners that might get involved in hosting something, back to the point made in the previous session about being the B of the bang of the bid, to look ahead to things that that we might want to host in the city, and to bring people together to plan ahead for that. And then I think we've got a particularly important role in terms of making sure that we monitor the environmental and social impact of events, as well as the positive economic impact as well. So we've got both a planning and bidding responsibility, and then a measurement responsibility as well.
Yeah, I'll just get into a little bit more detail of that. So the GLA is the lead authority for securing major sports events in London, and we assess them against the GLA's Major Sports Framework, which Howard has just listed, so I won't repeat that. But essentially, it's planning and delivering enhancement, promotion, engagement, activations and assessments across the city. In certain circumstances, we sign up to host city obligations, which is one of the mega events, as we like to see, coming to London as well. And we also engage with stakeholders, venues across London, to make sure that everyone's kind of aligned with the key targets that we're setting and the other policy areas that come in.
Sorry, I'm reminded about something that the first panel talked about, which is complexity. So as James said, very much the GLA leads when we're talking about major sporting events, and LNP supports that probably in 3 key areas, which is bidding, promotion, and in the delivery. Examples of bidding, information that we can provide as part of the bid is information and insights and data on London and why an event would want to host their event here in London, why this is a place to host it. From a promotion point of view, we have all of our Visit London channels that then we can make available in terms of promoting the event. There is also Visit London listing and ability to then further for them to sell tickets. There's PR. There is opportunities as well to be part of London and Partners events if they want to have access to some of the other business audiences that we have as part of our network. And then last but not least, delivery with the Convention Bureau. There are things such as accommodation, also venue selection. A lot of these events host events beyond the major sporting event itself, things like receptions, so we can help with the venue selection on that as well. One thing I would highlight, again, on sporting events, the GLA leads on that, but for LNP, we cover other things in terms of major events, so things with culture and e-sport as well. And those, then we would have the similar responsibilities, but then we will have the proactive looking at the opportunities and what's coming down the pike, aside from the bidding and promotion and delivery of those extra events as well.
Thank you all. So what specific examples can you give of where the Mayor of London's work and LMPs have actually brought, major sporting events into London?
Yeah, that's one for James.
Thanks, Howard. So there's some case studies that would be useful to run through with you. The Major League Baseball, we had a huge role to play in that. We were the power convening, brought everyone together, and we secured a 3-year cycle of games as well, with 23, 24, a break year, and then 26. We were the body that acted as the bid. We pulled the partners together. We were the consortium, and therefore that's still a successful consortium today, still running. That's a really good example, actually, of how we've worked with the stadium, a private agency as well, and then use London as the power convener. So that's a good case study there. And then you'll know that Euro 2028 is coming to Great Britain and Ireland, and we submitted the bid for London. So we again worked with the stadia to work out. We worked with all of the stadia originally. It was then basically came down, and then we put the 2 clear favourites through, supported them, said this is the host city package we can offer behind that, and I think our team were critical in kind of landing that bid. I think they're the kind of examples in both directions on how we've landed events specifically.
No, and those are 2 very good examples, so thank you for that. And what examples can you give of, and to be honest, I feel like you've between you. You've answered this question already, but I'll ask it in case you've missed something. What examples can you give of specific types of support provided by the Mayor and London and Partners at sporting events, and what impact has this had? And as I say, I think Rose answered it the most extensively, but if anyone feels like they've got something to add, please do.
I don't think there's specific kind of detail we can go beyond, but what we do a lot of the time as well is pull stakeholders together to... the previous panel mentioned the power of convening quite regularly. We do that for new assets that come into London, and I think the point that London Marathon were making is they've been here as a stalwart, as a kind of hero figure for X amount of years, so, you know, what support can we provide those? But ultimately, we're a really good convener. We work really closely with TfL, which is quite challenging, as again mapped out, but that's an evolving picture. We work really closely and well with them. So I think ultimately that our stakeholder management piece across it is one of the key areas that we offer agencies coming into, or big events that come into London. We're also horizon scanning the whole time, seeing what's available, what business development there is, opportunities out there to come and bring it into London in order to secure against our framework.
Great, thank you. Rose, only because I mentioned you, was there anything specific you wanted to add in addition to that?
I think the thing I would add is on that convening power as well. There was a mention of advocacy earlier, so it's not just about putting people together in the delivery, but it's also that thought leadership for us to be seen, bringing people together, because that does amplify in terms of our reputation as a city that can host these types of events and then, you know, celebrate. I think there was also talk about telling the story. So that's the only thing I would add to that, that we work with the GLA with as well.
Thank you. And whilst we're still on London and Partners, is it still LNP's ambition to become self-funding?
I don't know the answer to that question. Certainly it's, speaking as the chair of LNP, it certainly is LNP's ambition to source funding from private partners as well as from the Mayor and from contract type projects as well. So certainly LNP has a big vision of what it can do in the future, and that requires multiple sources of income. I should remind everyone that LNP operates at a small fraction of what some of our competitors operate at, and actually I think provides really good value for money, but and actually really good return on investment. So finding additional sources of income, is still a priority for LNP.
And given, so Rose gave a very extensive answer as to the work that you believe has gone on from LNP in terms of not only attracting major sporting events to London, but also the work that you do in analysing data and making sure things generally go in the right direction. So I guess my question would be, given all of that work that you guys have done on that with major sporting events, would you be able to evidence the contrary, you know, if you weren't there, and perhaps strengthening your argument for more GLA funding in the future, if you weren't there, that actually either that money would or would not still be coming into London and helping us grow as a city?
That's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but actually, I would say that the way that we measure our impact is on all additionality. So it is about something that wouldn't happen unless we had intervened. So I think that's answering your question in saying that how we measure in terms particularly the impact with gross value add or anything else, it's on the it's on a competitive nature, and that if we hadn't intervened, London would not even be either an option or potentially would not have received it. So at least certainly the impact that you see that we report on would be on that.
No, thank you. And on a final point, because it's exactly what I raised in the first panel, which is we get lots of organisation. I'm not singling out LNP, by the way, don't worry. Is that, you know, lots of organisations bandy about numbers, but that it's always helpful to know, well, actually, we have thought about it, and I think you've answered the question well, which is if we didn't exist, would the GVA or whatever you want to, you know, however you want to define it, would be the same. And it's not a debate for this committee on this particular issue. But I think Rose, what would be helpful afterwards, if you could just that analysis that if LNP didn't get involved with, and you can use in a specific example some of the ones that have been mentioned already, which clearly you've done the work on. if we weren't here, it wouldn't bring in the same amount or the same growth and level of funding to London. So that wasn't a question, but it would be helpful to have it afterwards.
Happy to provide that, of course.
Very grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garrett.
Yeah, thanks. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. From the, in terms of hosting sort of these big events, big sporting events, what are the main costs that fall to the GLA for doing those? I don't know whether that's one for you, Howard, or...
I can start, and maybe James can add on. So it's a globally competitive market. We have taken a policy on sporting events and other events as well, that we won't pay to bring things in. I should say, and I know it's not entirely within the remit of the committee, like I said, this is a highly competitive area, and there are countries around the world who, for various reasons, usually about promoting things, will put a lot of money on the table to bring in events. We aren't in that space. We will provide support in terms of obviously coordination. Occasionally, we'll provide a little bit of funding. I'll give one small example. We're hosting the World Table Tennis Championships in 2026, and we're making a contribution of £100,000 towards that, without which it probably wouldn't happen. But the impact of that relatively small amount of money and the resonance we'll have, the engagement we'll have with it will be, really quite significant. So part of it is about the cost in terms of the coordination. Occasionally, we'll support, for example, fan zones, activation.
So on that 100,000, what does that buy? I mean, it's very easy to sort of speak in a slightly metaphorical way.
Well, it's a contribution towards the cost of hosting.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially what we do, without that funding, they wouldn't come to London, potentially wouldn't have an event in England at all. So what we're able to do, but a little bit of seed funding, it allows them to then go back to the market and go, okay, we're going to London and this is why. So it's a relatively low cost for a big impact for that particular example.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's exactly what you were described, not getting involved. I'm not advocating that you should or shouldn't get involved in it. I'm just trying to understand what the position is, because I'm aware that this is throwing in allegations, obviously it's an area of commerce that is sometimes reputed to have a lot of brown envelopes involved, isn't it? Where people see a lot of prestige, a lot of pride at stake. They want to make a thing happen, and when there's a lot of money at stake. But so you said that you don't do it, but then you sort of just described an example of doing it.
What we have funded is, like I said, occasionally.
I'm not casting any aspersions.
No, occasionally some of the hosting costs, occasionally some of the, and then things like activation wider within London. We don't sponsor, is what I mean. Okay. We've done extremely well. London is a really good place to host big sporting events. I think we've demonstrated that. And one of the reasons people like MLB, NFL want to come to London, first of all, there's a really big home market in London itself. A big city with 8 million people, lots of sports fans. UK is a big market, and then we're a really easy place to get to from other places in Europe. And the platform that we give is then worth the investment that they make. So we're in this, like I said, we're in a very competitive environment, and we try and make sure, back to our assessment of the through our hosting strategy, we try and make sure that we're providing value for money for taxpayers from everything that we put into it, including, as we might come on to, the external costs of hosting things.
Okay, but in terms of cost to GLA, it's either small amounts like that. You're not, and what you're offering is the stuff that London offers. So it offers, venues and lots of people who might come along and watch your event and be excited about it, and all of that kind of stuff. You're not offering the greasing of the wheels.
So there's no money that kind of goes directly into it. So what you're seeing in the global market is money now exchanging for cities. We don't do that as it stands at all. But what we do is
and that's a policy decision rather than if we had some cash we might. We haven't got the cash, so we're not.
I think it's open for discussion. Quite frankly, it's not a closed shop yet. Okay. But currently, the steer very much has been that we don't put millions of pounds on the table to large events into London. However, that is the way the market is moving, so it's a constant conversation. All I would say is what we do is highlight investment in for Londoners. So when a major event comes into town, we make sure that there's activations across the city, we make sure that the TfL is running, and we make sure there's a city dressing programme that everyone knows it's in town. So there's a wraparound product that we put around the major sporting event for Londoners that brings them in, especially if they can't afford to go to the events. We make sure we have that other asset available for Londoners.
Is that an advertising product that you sell then to the brand?
We don't sell it.
That's something that okay.
That's on them. So we basically give them space for their own brand across London.
Okay, so it's a sort of indirect cost, effectively.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's it from me on costs. But
thanks,
you.
Chair. Thank you, Assembly Member Georgiou.
Yeah, just very briefly, and I appreciate you're not going to have the numbers to hand now, but something that's helpful for us. I mean, look, cumulatively, you know, cost to Met, MOPAC, things like that, you know, in hosting these things, look, we know that costs for major sporting events, although we recoup some costs from those putting on the events, you know, we special events, we get some money. I know there's debate at the moment on NIC funding with the government and things like that. But, you know, in terms of holistic costs for the GLA, Met, MOPAC, things like that, do we ever get those numbers?
Not directly, no. We don't get the specific costs, but we do work closely with the Met on big event arrangements and the coordination piece again. So, for example, the UEFA Champions League, they had a huge presence alongside a massive stewarding operation that the stadium provided and the city provided as well.
Yeah, once again, I don't think there's been any dispute as to the efficacy of the work that you guys do and how well it goes. I mean, that goes without saying. I think we in London, we do far better than many other major cities. I think the point I'm trying to get at is that, you know, as Assembly Member Garrett's going through, we talk about our successes, funding, things like that. But, you know, as a total number, the net cost, I think, is something that's relevant to the GLA.
I think we could pick a particular event and do it as a case study and see the net cost across the public agencies, but I don't have that information to hand.
Yeah, I think when you do that, don't just look at the ones where we were a net beneficiary. I think, you know, perhaps do two. One where we thought perhaps it would have been a significant cost in terms of policing and other sorts of funding that the GLA has provided around the periphery, and one that actually lessons learned and we could ask the organisers for a bit more money in that sense.
Yeah, I understand that. I think we also work hand in hand with the government on most of these projects as well. So it's quite a difficult cost to tie down because of the volume of partners involved in. But I will do my best to accumulate that.
Thank you, Assembly Member Polanski.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what Assembly Member Garrett was asking because I wasn't quite clear on the answer. So to make it more specific, Wales paid approximately £2 million to host the WWE Clash at the Castle. We know because a press release mentioned a 10-to-1 return on investment, and so that was specifically hosting a site. If I paraphrase what you're saying without putting words in your mouth so you can clarify or not, you're saying at the moment we're not currently doing those sorts of things, but it might be an ongoing conversation. I suppose the two sides of a debate are, one, people could argue that kind of investment then creates economic return for London. You could also argue, though, that's public money going straight to private capital, where I would want to see personally very closely what that investment entirely looked like in terms of returns to know that it was worth it. Is that where the conversation's at?
So your specific question there is where the conversation's at return against landing major events into London and paying for them. Is that the question?
We'll go for that first of all, and I'll check from the answer if you've answered what I think I'm asking.
Okay. We currently don't. Right. There isn't a discussion taking place of whether we should or not at the moment. The political stance we are given is not at the moment, but the landscape is changing so rapidly. I wouldn't be able to say that that's not something I would take as a paper to the business and say we need to look at this if we're going to continue to land major events in the future. That's kind of our current stance, but the absolute steer at the moment is we don't.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if you were able to hear the discussions that we were having earlier on this morning with the previous panel, but obviously I had a few reflections on the Wimbledon situation, where we have a very large, globally recognised, significant tournament that takes over the local area, and 500,000 people show up, and they spend a huge amount of money on tickets. It's lovely to hear that £3 million is given away by the Wimbledon Foundation, but frankly, that is loose change. Even if they only charged £100 per ticket, for a fortnight, and they charge an awful lot more than that. Their income is huge. And they have gone ahead with this business of putting lots of food outlets inside the Wimbledon grounds. So I've had a lot of complaints from businesses both in Wimbledon Town Centre and in Southfields, where people turn up on public transport and then are bussed from Wimbledon Town Centre up the hill to Wimbledon Village and to the grounds straight in. And from Southfields, they kind of like a constant flow from Southfield Station. They might go into Marks and Spencer's and buy a ready-made sandwich, but they don't really use any of the local facilities. So we've got this situation where we've got London locally based businesses who are not benefiting from what is a major globally recognised sporting event. And I just wondered, and perhaps if I start with you, Rose, if you could give us some idea of what steps the GLA is taking to ensure that there is more benefits to local businesses than I have just described, which I consider to be an absolute nadir of failing to, there's a lot of anger amongst local businesses.
I am not sure that I can speak for the GLA. James, do you want to take that? I can't speak to that directly, but what I can say, aside just in terms of major events in general, is the benefits to the wider, in terms of, I think again also discussed in the panel, is showcasing London, and in terms of also the visitors coming in, is not just on the day that they spend at Wimbledon, but whatever more spending and whatever else they see across London from a visitor point of view. So there are other benefits beyond what happens at a particular event, but that's kind of general for a lot of these major sporting events. But I can't speak specifically in terms of...
Yeah, I was going to bring in James next and then Howard and see if they wanted to comment on it. I'm sure there are other benefits beyond the local area. It's just obviously it's quite hard to sell it to local businesses because they are in the local area. So I just wondered, what do we do elsewhere? Is there anything that we could do to stop Wimbledon from behaving as a sort of black hole that sucks everything in locally?
Well, for various reasons, I don't want to talk about Wimbledon in particular. Obviously, it's subject to ongoing planning in terms of the expansion, and it is down to Wimbledon and All England Lawn Tennis Championships, to Altec, to work with local businesses and people in the best possible way. What I would say that we've done in terms of things like MLB is we've worked to through things like the supply chain to identify potential small business suppliers, and that's something that, again, that's going to be a big focus of the growth plan, is how we make sure that our small businesses get the best possible chance of securing contracts with some of these big events, either directly through us or with the venues, and in terms of activation, to make sure that when something's happening, for example, at the London Stadium, that then there are opportunities for people to engage with that, even if they haven't bought a ticket for that event, that there are opportunities elsewhere to engage with, for example, get involved in the sport. So I know NFL have had thousands of kids involved across London in flag football, which is a sort of light version of American football, where you don't need all the equipment and it's a bit easier to get into. You don't have to dress
up in quite the same outfits.
You don't have to dress up quite so much. It's not quite as
gung-ho
as what's the word, high impact, but it's a fun version of the game that can be played in relatively I think it's shorter time period and so on, so things like that to make sure that Londoners benefit from the things that we've been involved in securing.
Sure. I mean, we've seen the development of paddle courts around London as well, which I don't think the Altec Wimbledon has had anything to do with at all, which would have been nice to know. James, did you want to add anything to that? How can we make sure that supply chain and that involvement of locally based businesses, because each ground will have a sort of ecosystem, hopefully, around it, of other people who are benefiting from these major events, or even if Wimbledon doesn't bother with that?
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is we consistently drive local engagement with any event that comes into London. But I think we can't lose is the benefit for local businesses from most. I mean, Wimbledon aside, I don't know the level of detail, so I can't comment specifically on that. From sporting events, like from our economic assessments that we're doing, in 2023, across 6 events, Formula E, MLB, Ride London, the NFL and Jacksonville Jaguars coming into town, that's 160 million of direct economic impact was generated in London, and these are huge figures. And like the NFL had a direct impact of about 76 million, MLB 53 million. Then we're seeing Excel increase footfall in this area by about 12,000 people as well. So again, generating and supporting the local businesses. So in an overview kind of way, it's in a really good space. But in isolated, we do consistently work with the local areas, the local boroughs, in order to meet like specific standards that they set. And as the leader of Brent Council said, there's a lot of drives from the local councils to achieve what they want to from it, and then we pick up and do what we can to
yes,
do
I'm
that.
sort of, if you like, sort of reflecting from what was said this morning into, and it's good to hear that the growth plan will continue to drive that. And there's also not just co-production between the councils and local groups, but you're also saying that the GLA is involved in that as well. What steps are the GLA and possibly London and Partners then taking to maximise benefits and minimise disruption for local residents arising from the staging of these major events? I mean, we've sort of touched on the role of TfL. Obviously, the arrival of the Jubilee line, I think, has been incredibly helpful for Wembley. Although if you tried to get on the Jubilee line, which I did on the night when everyone was leaving the Taylor Swift concert, it was quite hard to get onto the tube without being surrounded by thousands of people wearing bracelets and flashing armbands. But it is good to see TfL doing that. What else are we doing?
I'll start, and I think James may have more detail. But the starting point is that obviously we've got some of the greatest stadia in the world, in London. We've obviously got 7 Premiership football teams and additional football teams in the Championship and League One, and actually going down into the lower leagues as well. We've obviously got Wembley, we've got the London Stadium, we've got Wimbledon, we've got Twickenham, we've got the Oval, we've got Lords. We are very well off in terms of stadia.
Quite a few of the teams in the WSL are also in London.
Indeed, absolutely, and increasingly playing in those big stadia as well.
That's right.
And that's before you get in things like Excel and the O2, which obviously hosts sporting events as well as other things. So one of the things here is about making best use of the venues that we do have, that obviously, have a programme of activity but have gaps where we can then, accommodate something big. And making sure that they are supported by infrastructure. And obviously, the Elizabeth line's made a big difference in terms of the things like the London Stadium. Jubilee line is vital for actually quite a few things, because Excel, the London Stadium, and Wembley, as well as obviously Waterloo and London Bridge, are on that line. So that's pretty crucial. For us, it's about making the best use of the infrastructure we do have, and when we're looking at future potential infrastructure, making sure that it's connected in an appropriate way and in appropriate locations, so it has so it's able to cope with very large numbers of people. One of the things I would say is very good about sporting events and music events to a certain extent as well, is that they're sort of counter-cyclical. So people are commuting in the opposite direction to the way people would normally commute, which again makes best use of that transport capacity. And things happening in evenings at weekends, that's great because the capacity is already there. The venues are already there. They're set up to host those things, and you can do it at a time that's minimal impact on sort of rush hour. So, but that's where our planning role really comes in, both in terms of planning around specific events, but then very long-term planning about London's capacity for hosting really big things in the future.
So we touched on earlier, because Assembly Member Georgie was asking about it, whether the GLA collects data. One part of the GLA definitely collects data, and that is TfL. And you were just talking about the sort of the time of the flow of people going out to Wembley is probably not going to coincide with the rush hour, or and that sort of thing, and weekend usage. Do we collect any other data, and what's the data show us from TfL in terms of the impact of the major sporting events on the transport system? Are there any areas where it's creaking a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the footprint is expanding. So we're getting more and more events coming into London, which for my my situation is brilliant. But it does have a very busy network with the TfL infrastructure, and therefore the coordination piece is more critical than ever before. What we're seeing is with the rise of the Women's Super League as well, games now, like a men's game selling out and a women's game selling out in the same weekend creates a brand new problem. So there are bits which just need to be worked through. But what I would say is TfL are an incredibly willing and engaged partner in this and are super supportive of us trying to achieve the ultimate outcome for London.
So if there was an overcrowding problem that is arising due to these new flows of larger numbers of people going to events, is that something you might be able to share with us afterwards, if that's an issue?
Yeah, if there's a specific challenge, I'm happy to go through it. Again, it's normally a coordination piece and working through it as an output, but yeah, I can share.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I can start with you, Howard. How do the GLA and London partners measure the environmental impact of major sports events in London, particularly with regard to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution?
Thanks very much for the question. Well, as you'll understand, one of the criteria that the Mayor uses in terms of both whether we bid for something and then how we run it is the environmental impact, and we are measuring the carbon footprint of selected events that have taken place in the city in 2024. So we are, I think, to be fair to say, the forefront, certainly among the leading venues or cities globally at looking at this. So we're doing some in-depth work now, and we want to be able to say not only that we're minimising the impact, that we are at the cutting edge of being a sustainable place to host big events. So I don't know if you want to go through the detail in terms of the carbon emissions checklist and so on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a key areas of focus within this piece because it's quite a big piece. It's the carbon emissions hotspot analysis and recommendations, so identifying the emission zones and seeing how they can support. It also recognises the GLA will not control all of the aspects of the event delivery. So again, it's explaining our policies onto anyone that wants to utilise London. Event carbon emissions checklist, so a checklist of a broader and universal approach for every event held in London. So we have an overview of what's happening. We also encourage anyone to, again, come in, sign up to our sustainability policy. So we're wrapping this around with major events that come into the city and putting it forwards. But there's some really good examples like London Stadium and Wembley Stadium sent zero waste to landfill from 2023's MLB series and Jacksonville Jaguars events respectively. So we're kind of making really good leaps in specific areas. The MLB's field of play will be reused in 2024 rather than just in and out. Jacksonville Jaguars worked with Wembley Stadium to replace the plastic poles on spectator flags with cardboard ones. It's lots of little bits, which it's kind of leading to a really good picture that we're providing. And then the Formula E's London events had a 72.16% recycling ratio, which is one of the highest we've seen as well. So we're looking at the best practice, sharing that information with other people that come into the city and trying to provide a greener space for events.
Great to hear. Is that checklist publicly available?
I will check.
And if so, would it be possible, or even if not so, would you be happy to share it with the committee?
I'd be happy to share it, yes.
Thank you very much. Transport, is that measured in terms of emissions? And specifically transport to international events?
It is, and that's part of our assessment. I'll give you an example. For Jacksonville Jaguars, 92.8% of people travel to that by public transport. For MLB, it was 90% of fans by public transport. And without for a second criticising our friends on the other side of the Atlantic, that isn't how normal NFL and MLB events work in the States. So in London, it's a completely different way of getting to and from the venues. And obviously, in the normal way, we analyse the impact of that and the carbon reduction compared to other forms of transport with both at TfL level and in the event space.
Thank you. I was asking Nick in the earlier panel from London Marathon about heat risks, like increased heat risks. How much work are you doing in the GLA to look at the changing impacts of a climate and sports events?
We work with the policy areas, so if policy areas are determining a new risk, we establish that, and that goes into our overview. But I can come back to you on the specifics of that. But yeah, we work within the environment policy area to make sure that we're learning from everything that's happening. And obviously, we are seeing trends of new. The cricket season is hotter, the football season's wetter, and there has an impact both, to grassroots and major sports. So we are looking at it as an industry, if you like. And then we are picking up from our policy areas and implementing what we can.
Thank you. Finally, can I ask, what are the GLA and London partners doing to use major sports events to boost grassroots sports in London, particularly around types of sports that have traditionally received less attention?
We've actually done some, well, I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but we've done an impact report, which we're now doing. We did last year, we're doing this year, and next year by Think Beyond, which is published. It's online. And that's shown some of the things we're specifically done in terms of engagement, inclusion, and empowerment, and the impact on grassroots sport. There's two things here. One is where there's a direct engagement. So the example would have been NFL flag. So American-style football is not something that historically people have played particularly much in the UK, unless you were, an American happy to live here. So it hasn't been an opportunity for people to get involved, and yet it's been very popular. So people have been watching it on TV without having that opportunity. So they've specifically created the flag program to help young people, the next generation of people who might play. And I know there's two things there. One is the possibility at some future point of having an NFL franchise based in the UK, which is a long-term possibility. And then the second is people actually playing the game and either doing that for recreational purposes or potentially getting to the point where they may actually go and play in the NFL. So that's a very direct one. Indirectly, there's obviously the inspirational impact, and although Assemblymember Cooper's got very legitimate local concerns about Wimbledon. What does happen after Wimbledon, and if you've been in any London park after that, is all of the tennis courts are immediately full of people who've inspired by Wimbledon to go out and try tennis. In the same way that you see a lot of people jogging the week after the marathon. So that inspiration of getting people into grassroots sport and getting people active is part of what we try and encourage. I don't know if you want to say anything in terms of the activation and how that engages with grassroots sport clubs as well.
Actually, what I was going to add was something a little bit more indirect, if I may, in terms of future facing and looking at trends, because one of the things we do as well is not just what we do immediately, but looking at future trends as part of sustainability and what new businesses are building on innovation. So one of the things that we do, both with venues and with sports and the rights holder, is connecting them to the future innovations so they can start thinking about how they can future-proof what their offer is. So that's the one thing that I wanted to say in terms of from what LMP provides those introductions.
Do you mind digging into that as an example? I just don't think I quite follow.
If there's any new innovation in terms of from a food perspective or from a ticketing perspective or anything like that, of something that they are going to offer, we can introduce them to what those future trends are, or potentially businesses that are looking into that, and just, sorry.
I'll give one example of that. We come across the company Notpla, that's based in Hackney. So Notpla it's a London business supported through Grow London Global, and it span out of, I'm going to say Imperial, but it might have been UCL, one of the London universities. And they use seaweed to make a 100% biodegradable packaging product. And partly through our support, they provided that as a water, it's like a pouch. So it feels like a little bit like the bubbles you get in bubble tea. But a big version of it, and you can break it with your teeth. You drink it really quickly, and then you can either eat the outside or drop it, and it completely biodegrades. So that has been trialled in the London Marathon very successfully. So rather than dropping all those bottles, or even the tins or the paper version, this thing, you eat or you swallow the inside, and then you can drop it, and it's easily collected and goes straight. I mean, it's 100% organic, so there's none of the residual impacts of having to treat it or anything before it goes in the system. Off the back of that, we're now promoting them internationally as a London product that could work, in different countries across the world. They're looking at I've got a deal where they're now using the seaweed stuff to coat the inside of cardboard containers, as opposed to the plastic coating that is then very difficult to separate out. We, obviously this is something that gets me very excited when we're talking about sporting events, the opportunity to showcase London businesses and London technologies off the back of it, and then get more contracts for them internationally.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. The last question is mine, but before my last listed question, I've got another one to ask. And actually, Deputy Mayor, it kind of piggybacks on what you've just said. In the first panel, you will have been listening, and you will have heard about the good news stories that came out of that panel, and the fact that we don't seem to have that amplified in the way that they could be. And whilst I wouldn't want you to tell our sporting partners of venues how to do it, are there any suggestions, and how can we promote some of these good news stories further from the GLA, and the knock-on effects as well? Just like that's really exciting what you've just spoken about, Deputy Mayor. A piece of London technology developed in London that could have a worldwide impact. These are all really good news stories. Why aren't we hearing more about them?
Well, we should be talking more about them, and in that context, I've very much welcomed this inquiry by the Assembly, which will draw some attention, and thank you for doing it. I think one of the things that will give us a platform is that, and this genuinely came out of the engagement on the growth plan. So we've been engaging on the growth plan now for 8 months, if not a little bit longer. And one of the things that came out of some of the sessions we did was this thing about sport, and sport being one of the big industries of London that is sort of invisible, because everybody knows it's there, but when you go to, a Premier League game, you see the action on the pitch, and obviously you see the stadium, but you don't see all the stuff that goes behind that, which is, it's massive supply chain, and then the huge impact of tourists flying in or coming by train, coming from around the UK to spend time in London. I was talking to a couple at who attended the baseball, who'd come from the States. It was their first visit to London. They were doing a week, so doing the game and another week. So all those impacts, and what a great thing it is for the city as an industry. So having that as part of what we call the experience economy in the growth plan is now saying this is an industry, one of London's top growth industries that we should all be very proud of, but should also, be singing the praises of and looking to see how we can make more of it. For the first time, I think, identifying it as something that this city does really well, alongside health and life sciences and tech and the green economy, I think will sort of raise the level at which we talk about it in policy terms. I don't know if you want to come in on the what else we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to keep highlighting the great work that the Stadia is doing as well. And there's a really good comment made by colleagues earlier. about the stalwart events that exist in London, period. And I think we can highlight those more. I would say that we are doing more in the last few years than we've ever done before. So the major sports events team now are looking at an economic report each year, which we can now measure against and see the improvements and showcase what the major sports events actually bring to the city. Because I don't believe that's happened in quite that direct fashion anymore. So we're now able to measure, look and review. The other bit is recently we launched a Women in Sport campaign, which was driven by us, which highlights all of the brilliant women's sport that we're going to have this summer. So I think those are kind of bits where we are leaning into that. We are an amazing city, and I'd say a global leader in world sports. And I think we are seeing that opportunity and leaning into it more and more as a business, for a better term.
Thank you. Rose, did you want to add to that?
I think it's complementary in terms of, because I did take that comment from the first panel. When we talk about London and Partners, we talk about telling London's story. It's a big part of what we do. Now, the audience may be slightly different, but definitely, particularly on those sustainability and innovation stories, we have the campaigns for B2B audiences, where we really highlight that. We have a campaign right now running to make sure that they see London as the place to come to invest and to have their business for those particular things. So yes, we do showcase that, but I think point taken that we can probably do more.
Thank you. So final question to you all. What further plans does the Mayor have to attract major sporting events to London and support their delivery? And Deputy Mayor, I suspect you're going to talk about the growth plan.
No, I can do. Two things. This mayor is a genuine fan of sport. I think everybody can see that. Very much engaged directly with MLB and NFL in terms of supporting their continued engagement with London. We had Triple H, the wrestler, in City Hall last year, and the mayor is talking about supporting, and I know, I guess I should say, spoiler alert here, that wrestling sits in that space between sport and entertainment in terms of sport. But the opportunity of hosting one of the big wrestling events here, and obviously WrestleMania being the biggest one, and the how London could provide a platform for being the one place outside of the US that you'd want to do that. And long term, the Super Bowl. We had the Super Bowl yesterday. The Super Bowl took place between Kansas and Philadelphia in New Orleans. So all the fans had to fly to New Orleans anyway. That is quite a long flight within the US. It cost money. They had to stay over. Most people will watch it on TV. There were some huge events in London last night. There was a massive event in Waterloo. Hundreds of people in what they call the virtual tailgate watching that the Super Bowl last night on a Sunday night, late at night, in the cold. I think we have a unique opportunity to host some of those things. There is a potential looking for another Olympic bid in the manifesto. We are one of the few places in the world that can cope with these big events, and I think we're very ambitious to see what we may be able to. Like I said, the reference to the comment before, just the very early stages of sounding out what might be possible, the B of the bid of before you even get to the B of the bang. We're quite ambitious in this space.
Thank you. Rose.
I was going to add that not just, and I know it, I appreciate that this is not the focus of today because it's sports, but it's just events in general. So when we look into the future, it's looking at the priorities that we are exploring as part of the experience economy for London. So making sure that events, it's not just on the sports side, but across all the other areas like culture, like esports, that in the combination is what really brings that London to the fore and showcasing London.
Thank you. And James, finally.
Yeah, I think you've heard from Hal. We have a very clear remit to go and get major sports events into London. which again, within the global market is really challenging. But we are still one of the most attractive offers. So we keep working with event partners, and we want to, again, look at the stalwart ones. What can we do to maximise their footprint across London as well? So from our perspective, there's still, we're doing horizon scanning all the time. We're looking at what's available, what we can go and get, and our team have a very clear remit to bring in more major sports events into London.
Right, thank you very much. So we've come to the end of our panel questions and to the end of this investigation. I'd like to thank all of our guests from both panels for attending this meeting and for the amazing responses that you've given us. We've now reached the end of the session, and the committee has a few more items of business to deal with, but in the meantime, please feel free to stay or leave. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Noted. Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion? Agreed. Can I ask the committee to note the work programme? Noted. And the date of the next meeting is for the 11th of March at 10 a.m. in the chamber here at City Hall. Any other business? I have no urgent business, which concludes today's meeting. Thank you.